Hey, Barry Manning here. Welcome to a Monday edition of the Garden Report. One day from Celtics training camp, starting with media day tomorrow morning. And we'll have plenty to talk about when it comes to all the interviews, all the news we get tomorrow. And we'll have plenty of live coverage for CLNS Media, everybody on the ground there tomorrow. Noah, uh, Rich, Amit will all be down there covering it all. And first, want to continue our Celtics rival series, the first team in the West that we're doing here on the Garden Report. And why not do the team that we just watched the Celtics face off with last in the NBA Finals, the team that Jason Tatum sent on Jimmy Fallon. They'll be facing again in the finals this year and entering his first full year on the beat. Mike Curtis, Dallas Morning News. Mike, great to have you here. How excited are you for this season? How much are you looking forward to covering this team in full this year after that mad dash to the finish last year?
Yeah, man, I don't think you can get much better than the NBA Finals, but I'm definitely looking forward to this season, especially with all the additions the Mavericks have brought in. We're going to talk a little bit about Klay Thompson and what he brings to the team, but they also got Najee Marshall and Quentin Grimes. They brought back Spencer Dinwiddie. You add that to a group that already has Luka, Doncic, Kyrie Irving. Guy like Derek Lively is going to be emerging in his second year. So I'm looking forward to seeing how the pieces all fit together and to see if they can get back to the finals, probably to face the Celtics.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that possibility is going a little bit underrated. If we throw it back to a year ago, Dallas, they make the Grant Williams addition. That ends up being like the big defensive piece they're hoping they'd fit into the lineup and, give them some balance on both ends of the floor. It didn't work out. Made a lot of midseason moves that ended up positioning them to make a finals run. And you look back at Gafford and PJ Washington and some of the moves and additions they made there. It gave them that great balance. So bring it to this year. Obviously, I think most people are going to give them more of a possibility after going to the finals to get there again, even in a loaded conference. But I don't think there'll be many people's pick. And I think the big swing guy, as you mentioned, is going to be Klay Thompson. Obviously, you know what Luka's capable of after a near MVP season from him and a finals run. Kyrie redeemed himself in many ways last year with his play. And now Klay comes in here after a rough finish to his Warriors tenure, ups and downs over the last handful of years following the two big injuries, but a fresh start. And he seems excited about it. Obviously, he's been watching the tapes of the finals run out there, all that. And at his best, he's shown to be shades of that old Klay in spots. But obviously, the defense is taking a hit. We'll see what his role is going to be here. Obviously, he's probably going to have to take a step back from how massive a role he had with the Warriors earlier in his career. So that's going to be, I would throw it right up there with the 10 most interesting things to watch for going into this NBA season. Because if he can be 80% even of the old Klay, that's a massive addition for this team. And if the defense works with him in that lineup, you're looking at a team that might be the favorite to make the finals again here. But age, injuries, some of the defensive things we saw from him, and the fact that he's not playing with the best two defensive guards, period, here in Luka and Kyrie, I do think raises some questions here. How do you see his role playing out? How do you see the fit of Klay in Dallas?
Yeah, you mentioned it right there. If he can be 80% of what he once was in Golden State, a guy that can pretty much catch and shoot with the best that ever played this game. He's a career 41% three-point shooter. The only time he's shot less than, 40% in his career from three were these past two seasons in Golden State, which obviously came after the two major leg injuries that he's still trying to work back from and kind of gain into his full form. I think when you got a guy like Klay Thompson, he adds a different dynamic offensively to this Mavericks team. Obviously, you have got two guys like Luka and Kyrie who are pretty ISO heavy. They're going to get a lot of attention. He's going to be a beneficiary of those open shots that were generated last year from guys like Derrick Jones Jr., PJ Washington. A lot of those guys were in the corner when Luka and Kyrie drew those double and triple teams. Now you got a guy like Klay Thompson who's going to be able to get open, clean looks, and all he has to do is knock them down. I think defensively, that is something to keep an eye on. Can he move the way he used to when he was in his prime? Probably not, especially after those injuries. But if he can just play solid defense and stay in front of a guy, he doesn't have to guard the best perimeter defender on it, the best perimeter player offensively on a nightly basis. I think that'll be left to guys like PJ Washington, Najee Marshall. I even think you see Derek Lively join in that mix as well. But if he's able to just be solid, I think the Mavericks will get everything they wanted when they did that sign and trade for Klay.
Yeah, and I understand wanting to bring in a guy who has championship pedigree, wanting to bring in a future Hall of Famer since he wants to come to you. They obviously recruit him pretty heavily there. And I also like it coming in tandem with Marshall coming in. That was an underrated move. I think a necessary move to balance that out a little bit. Klay almost certainly starts to begin the year, and we'll see how it goes. I do think there's a case for him to come off the bench, and maybe that ends up happening eventually, just because when you look at how last year went, you end up going from more offensive leaning team to a team that had, perimeter defenders that you could throw at guys. Derrick Jones Jr., being the big one that emerged as a starter there, and he's out the door here. You hope Marshall can replace some of the stuff he brought. Better shooter certainly too, so maybe there's a chance even that he's a better fit than Jones was. But Josh Green goes out the door over the summer as well, so that's another guy with some perimeter defensive skill there who's gone. And again, Thompson, he's not going to be the defender he used to be. Like, that's just it's not going to happen. But is there some way to scheme? Is there some way to make what's essentially three guards? Like, I think that's the problem more than anything there. I know Klay's a bigger guy, but you're playing three guards effectively, three guys that defenses can pick on. And in the past, Dallas has had defensive issues, and Jason Kidd has done a better job of scheming to make it work and emphasizing that side of the ball. And I'm sure he'll do that again, even with those three stars in the lineup there. But if it's not going to work defensively, it's going to be a challenge for them to win consistently, I feel like.
Yeah, it's interesting when you look at it. When you talk about playing three guards, obviously Luka has the size of small forward with him being 6'7". Kyrie obviously has the mold of a one, and Klay obviously has the mold of a two guard. I think you'll probably see Kyrie stick to the ones, Klay sticks to the twos, and Luka may play against some fours if you slide PJ over to guard the three position. Just depending on how matchups work. Everyone knows it's two different games on offense and defense. When they're on offense, it's going to be like you got three primary guys who can shoot the ball. So I think just going forward, it's going to be up to Jason Kidd and the rest of that coaching staff to kind of, like you said, scheme and figure out where to put Klay on both ends of the ball. But I think starting off, like you said, we'll definitely see him in that starting lineup, just because you don't give a guy that much money and bring him off the bench, especially if he's coming in with an edge. He wants to remind everyone that he's still the player that he once was. He can still shoot the ball with the best of them. I think he's going to come in with that chip on his shoulder and kind of take on those challenges defensively.
Yeah, and he can also embrace sometimes, I think, more of that catch and shoot role. He doesn't have to create as much here. He can rely on those two guys who are going to get enormous pressure, Luka especially, and just take a ton of wide open shots. And that might lead to a more efficient season on its own for him from three. Like you said, he's dipped below 40 a little bit these last couple of years. I think he's had some spots where he's gone through some slumps and has had to try to shoot himself out of, some lows there. And I think there'll just be more good rhythm here. I like the fit offensively for sure, especially playing with those two guards. This is the most open he's ever going to be, or has ever been, by far, even playing next to Curry for all those years out there. And Durant, like, he still might be more open in this situation here, which is amazing to think about, especially with those rim runners. So I like that fit for sure there. But it's the defense again. And, I want to look back at the finals a little bit, because that was a big story there too. Their defensive posture, their ability to guard Tatum, Garter Brown. But first, I want to give a shout out to our great sponsor, Prize Picks. And it is a football night. Always some great football going on this time of year. It's like there's no days off from it. And throughout September, I know September, we run out of time a little bit here. So you want to get on this offer while you can. They are giving a Caleb Williams square away. So this is for next week. 1 yard. All you got to get is one Caleb Williams yard, and you're going to win that square. And you know the deal with Prize Picks. 2 or more players, and you have your daily fantasy team. It's our official daily fantasy sports partner here on CLNS Media, and you can win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. It's the best way to get in to get action on sports in most states. You can play Prize Picks as the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy, and that's big for football right now too. Guys going down left and right, so you line up, stay and play, even if one of your players gets injured. And the big thing too, if you have a year-long fantasy league you're doing, all your guys are going out. I got a couple of Niners guys on my year-long teams that are down already. It's a new week every week that you're doing it here. Put your team together. Some guys get hurt. You got that injury insurance policy, and you can build a new team next week. That's a great thing about daily fantasy on Prize Picks. So go to the app today, use the code CLNS. That's CLNS to get $50 instantly when you play $5. Great offer still going on right now over there. Code CLNS, get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. So let's throw it back, Mike. 3 months ago, right? More or less, the finals. A short series, some good games in Dallas, and an overwhelming game 4 that gave Dallas a little bit of hope that they could get back in it, but then they just got overwhelmed in that game 5 that the Celtics end up clinching their 18th championship on that night. Still a crazy night to look back on, and a series that some people felt Dallas could win. I think it was pretty split nationally. People who thought that they had 2 of the best players in the series, so that could drive them, but it ends up being that depth. I mean, Sam Hauser hits 11 threes in that series. Horford does his thing. Porzingis comes in for a couple games, the game 1 especially there. And it just ended up being the depth of Boston that was too much for Dallas to handle. But also the amount of guys that they could throw at Luka, tire him out. He was trying to go at the Hausers and Pritchards of the world, and they were able to stand up against him. And it just ended up being a really frustrating series for Luka in particular. Kyrie, too, who had his struggles throughout that series. When you look back now with some of the changes they made over the offseason, what needs to go differently, if these 2 teams were to meet again in the finals, or just in general for this year for Dallas to reach that championship level?
Yeah, I think a lot of things have to go right for this team. You look at last year, I don't think they were favored in any of the series that they played. You look at the Clipper series, obviously they went against a team without Kawhi Leonard. With Kawhi Leonard, I think a lot of national media probably thought that the Clippers would beat Dallas. You look against the OKC series in the second round, a lot of teams thought that they were the number 1 team in the West. So obviously they were the big favorites. You had Shai Gilgeous-Alexander playing at an MVP-like level, along with Chet Holmgren coming in and being a force on both sides of the ball. And then obviously against the Minnesota Timberwolves, I don't think anyone, myself included, who was covering the team for the last few weeks, thought that the Mavericks would go up 3-0 on the Timberwolves the way they were playing. Just beating the Denver Nuggets, upsetting them, and then obviously going against the Suns. I think they had a stride and a confidence that I wasn't sure that could be matched against the Mavericks. So they ended up overcoming the odds in each of those first 3 series, and then they ran out of gas in the finals against the Celtics. I don't think they had enough depth, like you mentioned. I don't think they had enough help on the offensive end outside of Luka Doncic. He pretty much was a one-man band. He was out there playing hurt, playing with a chest contusion that he needed injections for. I think a lot of people thought that Kyrie would be the one that kind of evened the series, because you got Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown over on the other side, and you got 2 stars in Luka and Kyrie, but Kyrie never found his footing in that series. And he said it on record. I think he was screaming a few weeks ago that he took accountability for it, that he didn't play up to his standard. And when it comes down to it, adding a guy like Klay, who gives you a third scoring option, will kind of equalize things a little bit. But you're still going to have to go through a gauntlet of a Western Conference. OKC just reloaded. They got Isaiah Hartenstein. They got Alex Caruso to add to what was already a really good team, especially defensively. Minnesota's going to come back. They have a shifty new point guard in Rob Dillingham that I'm sure Mike Conley's going to take under his wing. And Anthony Edwards is just going to get better, especially after the Olympics experience that he just had. Denver's going to stay in the mix, obviously. You got to think about the Memphis Grizzlies, who are going to welcome back Ja Morant. They're going to be right there in the mix. So the Mavericks are going to have their hands full in terms of getting back to the finals. I think it can happen. I think it's going to take a good deal of chemistry coming together. They're going to start training camp here in Las Vegas starting on Tuesday. They're going to spend 4 days out there. They just want to get some continuity between the team, similar to what they did last year in Abu Dhabi when they started training camp over there. So it's going to take a total team effort, and health is going to have to be on their side as well in order to get back.
Yeah, and the West is crazy. Obviously, this is the first team we're looking at in our series here out West. And I think Thunder, a popular pick to lead the conference next year, probably the most talented roster and the 1 seed from a year ago. So you give them the benefit of the doubt, I think, out there. And a team that gave Dallas a good run, too, in that series. So I think it almost feels inevitable that those two teams are going to end up meeting up again at some point. I think Minnesota, Denver, even after some of their losses, fair. So that's, 3 competitors right there that could already push you down to 4. And then you got some real wild cards, the Clippers. What are they going to look like health-wise? Phoenix. I actually like Phoenix going into this year. I like some of the changes they made. I think they'd be a tough matchup for Dallas if that was going to be a 4 or 5 round one. And then New Orleans. If they're fully healthy, fully loaded, they've shown to be a top-tier West team within the past handful of years here. And then there's always the potential that they're banged up or not finding things right defensively. They lost Valanciunas too, which was a real loss. So they could be a playing team or even just drop out of that top 8 entirely. And the Lakers, Kings are the Kings. So feel pretty good about Dallas being in that top 6 at the very least there, which is good for them. But an injury, a bad week or two, things are going to be so tight in that conference that it's tough to tell exactly where you're going to land at the end. It's always going to be a good bet that any of these teams, even the Thunder, it's such a tough conference that there's probably a bigger chance for any of these teams going into the year that you're not going to make the finals than the chance that you are. But what's good for Dallas, and I said this about them last year too, Luka can just win a series. And that's pretty much what he did throughout all those series last year. Is he's going to be the best player in pretty much any series except a Denver one. And even he is as equipped as anyone to put out the stat output, the overall production that Jokic does. And I think he's as daunting of like a one-on-one matchup for him in that spot as anyone in the league. So I'm not going to look at them in any series. Even in that Celtics one a year ago where I felt pretty good about Boston, the one thing you said is if Luka goes crazy, if he takes over this series, if he's healthy, especially you mentioned the injury, they can win any series. And that's still the one I have, my gripes about this team. I have a lot of questions about this team, but he can just win a series. And that's a really special thing to have. If you're talking about guys who can do that, it's probably just Jokic, Giannis, and Luka. I think that's it in terms of guys who can just win a series on their own. And you need more help than that to win a championship. You can, question here, is he carrying too much weight on his shoulders to be able to go the distance when he's doing that much for this team? Obviously, I think you saw the fatigue by the end of that run last year. But that's a special thing that this team has. And there's a lot of questions around him, but you got to be high on his ability to just give them a chance in any series.
Yeah, and that's what they depend on him on a nightly basis for, is to go in and do exactly what Luka does: score, facilitate, rebound. You're guaranteed going to get almost a triple double from him on a nightly basis. And he's one of the most gifted scorers we've ever seen. He has the footwork, he has the ball handling. He's a big body, so he can absorb contact, he can shoot. Um, who
What
knows?
surprised you most when you came down from Detroit, once you got to be around him day to day?
Um, how in control he is. I don't think I noticed that. Like every time I saw him, the previous two times when he came to Detroit over the last 2 years, he always seemed to wow you with how in control he is. And like he's not the most athletic, he's not the fastest. You know exactly what he's going to do, yet you can't stop it. A lot of defenders like can't stop him. He has an innate ability to get to the free throw line, draw fouls, even though he probably wish he got there a little bit more. I think it's interesting just his overall talent. Like that step back is very lethal. Even though everyone knows it's coming, he's able to knock that down and get that shot off, especially over taller defenders like we saw against Rudy Gobert in that Timberwolves series. So I think that's pretty much what stood out to me the most, just the fact that he's so much in control and there's not a lot you can do to kind of throw him off his game. He has to throw himself off his game, like whether if he's getting into a shouting match with the referees or not getting back on defense because he's complaining about a call. I think that's what hinders him the most, but he can pretty much do whatever he wants to do on a nightly basis.
Yeah, what do you think the Celtics did effectively against him? Because they were able to slow him, limit
Yeah,
him, and tire him out through that series.
yeah, they were sending body after body against Luka. He looks up, he has Jason Tatum on him one moment, then he has Jaylen Brown on him, hounded him and Kyrie for majority of that series. Kristaps Porzingis was also guarding him at one point, and I think Al Horford as well. But the fact that you were
Yeah, I
able to
was
throw
great
some,
against him.
yeah, you were able to throw so many different looks at him. And this is one of the reasons why I voted Jaylen Brown for MVP, because he guarded Luka for most of that series, and he did it on both ends of the floor. It's hard to do that. It's hard to be productive on both ends of the floor, offense and defense, when you're trying to score as much for your team, especially while Jason Tatum didn't have it a little bit early on in the series. And then you're also giving the same amount of effort to stop an offensive juggernaut like Luka Doncic. So I think that's pretty much was the difference maker. And I think Boston knew that the Mavericks didn't have the depth. They didn't have the options. They didn't have a lot of pieces that would be able to, I guess, affect the game offensively. So if we just shut down Luka, then everything else will be okay. So I think that was a big difference maker as well.
Yeah, and that was a little surprising because going into it, you're like, all right, you might have to just let Luka get his, and then shut down everybody else and live with Luka scoring 30, 40, maybe even 50 points, make him a scorer. But they limited him, and they put pressure on him, and they wore him out. The final numbers for Brown in that series against him, obviously, like you said, ended up being Finals MVP in large part because of that effort. 9 for 22, which is about as effective as you could probably be on him, logging 154 possessions in 32 minutes over the five games there. Jaylen did. So I was still a little surprised. So I think after game 3, Brown hits that big shot late. Celtics go up 3-0. If the series ends right there, I'm probably like, all right, Brown's probably the MVP. Game 4, it was game 4, kind of a throwaway game. Both Tatum and Brown struggled in that game. So I still think Brown's in a good position coming out of there. But game 5, Tatum comes out in the first half with the 9 assists, I think it was, into halftime, manipulating that defensive approach that the Mavs had on him, which I want to talk a little bit about too. And it made me think coming out of that game, I'm like, all right, Tatum didn't shoot well at all in this series. I think it was like 38, like 26 from 3. He really struggled from the field. But the passing was so good throughout. He was the point of attack guy. Sometimes he had like 3 bodies around him at the rim, and he's just firing out pass out of after pass after pass out of there. And I think a lot of that allowed Brown to do what he was able to do in that series. So I was Brown all the way through like 4 games. And then game 5 ends, and I'm like, all right, 9 assists in the first half. Big game, as the Celtics close it out. The best player, per se, on the best team almost always wins this award. So not only did I feel coming out of that game, if I had a vote, I would have voted Tatum. But when I went downstairs to watch the ceremony after, I'm like, it's going to be Tatum. So Silver goes up. He's like, Jaylen Brown. And I was like, whoa. Like, I couldn't believe it. And he couldn't believe it either, it looked like. And I think, what was the final vote? 7-4, I
Yeah,
believe.
there were 3 or 4 votes for Tatum.
Yeah, it was something like that. Brown ended up winning by a solid margin. Like you said, you voted for Brown. What swung you to say? Was it tough? Did you talk to anyone about it? Kind of, pick some people's brains about, like, what led you to that decision?
Yeah, it was definitely tough. I If it was up to me, or like you mentioned early on in the season or early on in the series, I was trending towards Brown anyway. But then um, Tatum had the big game 5, obviously. I don't think he or Brown had a really good game 4. Um, but like you mentioned, he didn't shoot the ball well, but he was doing everything he could for his team. Just from a facilitating standpoint, I thought he was outstanding. Um, what really swayed it for me was the fact that Jaylen was able to do it on both ends of the floor. Like, it came down to defense for me. I didn't look at it from a points, rebounds, assists average, which people tend to do. They look at the average for the series and be like, oh, that's the Finals MVP. I didn't look at it from that standpoint. I just think about who impacted this series most. I look at game 1. I think Kristaps Porzingis had a really profound impact, but Jaylen Brown was right there. I think game 2, Drew Holiday had a really big impact on that game. Jaylen Brown was still there. And then he was just that constant that I looked at in terms of who's impacting this series the most. So that's why I went with Jaylen Brown. I did talk to a lot of other national writers at halftime, and just to see where the consensus was. And we were able to have a couple of conversations that kind of led to that decision. But it was, I think, overarching, it was Jaylen Brown for sure. But you can't take away from what Jason Tatum did in that final game. It sealed the series. 31 points, 11 assists, 8 rebounds. He made all 8 of his free throws. Didn't shoot the best, but he still got a championship out of it.
So you weren't surprised when they said Brown?
Nah, I wasn't.
Well, I want to talk a little bit more about Tatum after our little break here to tell you about Game Time. And basketball will be back in about a month, but right now, again, it's football season. College games over the weekend. I'll be going up to Syracuse before long to see the Orange, even though it took a tough loss last week against Stanford. And then Patriots, there's some deals out there. You want to go see, maybe May's going to start in a week or 2 here, see what he's made of. You're in Dallas, you're reading Mike, you want to go see the Cowboys. Plenty of great deals on Game Time, our official ticketing app here at CLNS Media. And I love it. Used it for years. My favorite feature, of course, the seat views. You're able to see where you're sitting. It's a new arena, maybe a new concert venue for you. They have interactive feature that allows you to see what it looks like, where your seat's going to be. Also, the Game Time lowest price guarantee. They'll credit you 110% of the difference if you don't find the lowest price on Game Time. All in pricing, Game Time picks. Curation makes it easier to save on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. All of it available on Game Time. A great app. So you can download it, go over there today, and check out all the games that are coming up this weekend, this month, even all the way later into the fall. And they're giving you $20 off your first purchase right now with the code CLNS. Just use the code CLNS and get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Create an account, redeem that code CLNS, and then you'll get that $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Love Game Time. Again, go check it out. So Tatum, I've had this conversation a million times. It's kind of getting old at this point, but weird summer for him. The benching, some disrespect, slight about his performance through the playoffs, the shooting, whatever else it might have been. And obviously not winning MVP either. Kind of a weird place for a guy like him who, like you said, played pretty solid despite some poor shooting numbers in the finals. Led his team to a championship in many ways. So I'm interested, these preseason lists always come out, Mike. Have to imagine he'll be like 5, 6, 7 on a lot of them. I ended up having him 5. But I talked about it with Keith Pompey last week. He and Embiid are in that same position, not quite like the top caliber players in the league, the 3 or 4 guys that we mentioned earlier, Luka among them, but right in that mix, right below it. And when I was building my list going into this year, I actually stopped at Luka and Tatum, and I'm like, all right, obviously the numbers favor Luka, the output, the load he's able to handle, all that. So I think almost anyone would position Luka ahead of Tatum, but Tatum's team just beat Luka's. You get more defense from Tatum. Tatum took a leap as a passer, and even though I think Luka's probably going to finish considerably ahead of him in an MVP race this year for a lot of different reasons, he didn't quite pass him, I'd say. But I do think Tatum probably closed the gap a little bit on Luka in my mind. And I actually thought for a second about ranking him over Luka, but I just couldn't do it with the stats and the output. And again, the weight that Luka has to carry for this Dallas team. How do you weigh those two against each other at this point in their careers?
Oh, that's a good one. When you sent me that topic, I was like, oh, that's a really good conversation because when you look at it right now, I think Tatum has the better resume, all because of that championship. That championship and that Olympic gold medal kind of separates him from the regular season production that Luka Doncic brings, pretty much on a nightly basis. When it comes to numbers and production, you can count on Luka for 30, 10, 10 every night. Um, but he hasn't gotten over the hump with playoff success and obviously international success, even though he's been playing since he was a teenager. Um, when it comes to and when you look at how Luka performs with his Olympic team, without Luka, that Slovenia is not an Olympic team that can pretty much contend with the likes of the United States, Canada, Germany, those kind of upper tier teams. But when it comes to like head to head, I think you just got to go with your preference. Do you want a guy who can pretty much fill it up on the offensive end? You want a guy who can also score, maybe not in mass or bulk production, but do you want a guy who can also rebound and defend, which Jason Tatum has proven himself to do just with that long list, that long frame that he has. So I think you just got to go with whatever your preference is. At this stage of their careers, I think um, overall, I would say Tatum is the better player, and I would say Luka is the better offensive player. It's just like the conversation that they had in the finals: is Luka and Kyrie the best backcourt that's ever played? I think they're one of the most skilled, one of the best offensively. Um, but overall, I think you got to give it to the groups or the duos that have won championships together that have had a little bit more success on when it really mattered. So I think it's a conversation for sure. They're in that weird tier. I think when you look at the top 7 players in the NBA, you can look at the first 4 are probably international. Nikola Jokic, Luka Doncic, Giannis Antetokounmpo, throw Shea Gilgeous-Alexander in there, Joel Embiid. I think that top 5 could be all international, and then you can get to Jason Tatum, Kevin Durant, LeBron, Steph. That's 9. It just depends. There's a lot of players out there. I think when you take a look at just Luka and Tatum, they're kind of in that same tier.
Yeah, and there's so many ways to rank it too. I love emphasizing defense in it. So that's where I give Tatum a little bit of the benefit of the doubt despite the streakiness. I went Jokic, Giannis, Luka, Shea, Tatum, Embiid. Again, we talked about that Embiid thing last week. Probably more output than Tatum. Probably carries more weight than Tatum night to night, but Tatum's just beaten him so many times in series and regular season games. It's tough to put him over him. And then, you mentioned a lot of the veterans, but Wembanyama is going to probably be there in that conversation this year. So that's coming.
Yeah,
And I'm interested. I was looking at like the analytical aspect of this, and I love these Darko charts that kind of like show your trajectory night to night over the
mhm.
course of your career. And Tatum, I was very surprised by this because, again, I think everything you said was valid, and I felt similar about it, ranking Luka ahead of him. But analytically, on off, counting offense and defense, Tatum's got a little bit of an edge, and a decent margin there in terms of the analytics. And again, just one model here, not the gospel, but I was surprised to see Tatum over Luka in this model. And again, if we put it on offense, Luka gets a little bit of an edge there. Still pretty close. And then it's the defense that is where Luka really takes a hit in the comparison between these two guys, and it tells a story. Luka's got to improve his defense, I think, to win a championship. And Tatum, like, he's been a high level offensive player to this point in his career, but then the playoffs and the finals, that shot disappeared from him a little bit. So if he's going to have to stay at this level, sustain this level for this team, he's got to find that offensive consistency. But two similar age guys, two guys at a similar caliber in this league, two guys who just faced in the finals. And, like I said, Tatum was saying on Fallon that he thinks they'll face again, maybe just the easiest answer to that question. But they're close. I think they're closer than most people would think based on the stat sheet.
Yeah, I think Tatum's going to come back this year looking just looking for vengeance. I think the fact that he won a championship but was kind of slighted with the USA experience, wasn't able to kind of show that he could have impact on the team with several Hall of Famers, specifically LeBron, Steph, and KD. Um, I think he thought that he was probably deserving to be among the rotation, and I think he's going to take it out on the rest of the league. I, for one, can't wait until the Celtics and the Warriors face off twice this year. I think he's going to try to go for 40 in both of those games, and maybe Jaylen Brown as well, because he was left off the team as a whole. So I'm looking forward to seeing what they're able to do. Um, I'm looking forward to seeing, like, they're bringing the same team back. They're running it back with the same group. Can they have the same amount of success that they had last year? And if not, which team will kind of threaten their Eastern Conference championship, NBA Finals championship? Um, will it be the Knicks who retooled? Will it be the Bucks who will have another season under Giannis and Dame? Will it be Philly who added Paul George? I'm looking forward to seeing what goes on in the East as well.
Yeah, and already some health issues on the New York side. I know some reporting that Randall might not be ready for camp, and Robinson might miss into the winter, December there. So they have a tough start already going there, and those two will face on opening night. The Warriors game comes up pretty quick too, November 6th. Steve Kerr goes to the Garden. I don't know how the timing worked out on that. I think the schedule was out before all that Olympic stuff, but worked out well if it was a coincidence. And I think Kerr was saying NBA.com. I would say probably some Kyrie-esque booze at the Garden for Kerr this fall when he goes in there with the Warriors. Which, who
I
would
can
have
see
thought
that.
that he'd be the latest Celtics villain? Dallas. When's the first Celtics Mavs game? I want to say it's in Boston. As I scroll through here. Oh no, the first one is in Dallas, January 25th. And then
Yeah.
pretty soon after is the Boston rematch on February 6th. So we'll have to wait a little while to see these two teams face off, and we'll see where it's at that point. Again, for Dallas, it's like, where's Klay going to be positioned at that point in
Mhm.
their lineup? And for the Celtics, who will probably have Porzingis back at that point, I would think, how do they sustain without him? How do they figure it out in their front court? How do they manage their guys through the regular season, especially Horford, who's going to have to start for him? I know you mentioned some of the competitors there, but what do you think in terms of like Boston getting back to the finals and doing what they did again this year on their end is going to be most important for them?
Yeah, I think it's theirs to lose. Like they just have to stay consistent, solid, play the same brand of basketball that got them to the finals last year. Um, they're still one of the deepest teams in the league, if not the deepest team in the league. They just have to be consistent. Um, you hope that the individual stuff doesn't get in the way of Tatum and Jalen Brown. They're both gonna probably come in with a chip on their shoulders. They both want to go back to back. You just gotta hope some of that stuff doesn't get in the way of it. And from everything I hear, as far as reporting wise, and they say it all the time, like the people always try to like divvy them up and make them go against each other, but we're gonna have to see that play out on the floor. And that's what I'm interested in seeing the most.
Do you think it'll be these two at the end? What are the chances that we see a rematch next summer?
I don't think that we'll see these two. And I'm saying that from the standpoint of we're not going to see the Cavs and the Warriors go 4 straight times. That was unheard of at that point. So I don't think we'll see a rematch just because of how tough the West is. I think the Mavs can get back, and I think the Celtics are both teams are able to get back, but I don't think it's going to happen. I just think a new competitor is going to emerge. We just have to wait and see which team will.
Yeah, I worry about Dallas finding their lineup through the early portion of the year. Once they figure that out and figure out what the rotations work best there, which rotations work best, I think they can make a run. Now, I think they're capable of beating Denver. It's tough. I think Phoenix would be a really tough matchup for them, but I still think that's when they win. I'd probably pick Dallas in any series. But when it comes to Oklahoma, who they nearly pushed the 7, right? On that Shea foul.
Yeah. They're right
So, I
there.
mean, they were already right there. And they add Hartenstein, they add Caruso. It's going to be hard not to pick the Thunder in the West this year. And it could be Dallas, Oklahoma, West Finals that decides that. So, again, breaks, Luka being Luka, things go their way. I'm not ruling out Dallas getting there again. I mean, I think a lot of people would have ruled out Dallas getting there last year based on how the West stacked up. Everybody picked Denver. Things went sideways for Denver in that second round. All of a sudden, Dallas had an opportunity. I think it'll be a similar situation if they do it again this year. And it's tough not to pick the Celtics with how they're constituted right now, but I don't think it'll be a slam dunk. New York's loaded up. Milwaukee, I'm not ruling out, especially them. I think they match up pretty well with the Celtics. And then Philly, if Embiid's healthy, they're a player, and that'd be a tough series. I don't know about the easiest run ever thing for the Celtics. I think that's a lot of hyperbole, especially with Dallas being healthy for the finals. But they caught breaks, and I think Stevens has said it. Joe's probably going to say it tomorrow. Guys on this team are probably going to say it tomorrow. It's going to be harder this time around because you won it. You got to get back mentally. It's a hangover effect sometimes for these teams, and your rivals loaded up. So it's not a slam dunk that they're going to be back, but it's a pretty good bet just based on their talent level right here. So my pick right now today is Celtics Thunder, but I'm not ruling Dallas out.
Hmm, that's a good one. Do I need to make a pick right now?
If you want to, I'm not going to force you to.
Okay. I'm gonna wait. I'm gonna wait. We're gonna revisit this probably. We should get back together when these two teams play in January, and I'll make a more educated um, guess then.
Yeah, let's see if Porzingis is back. Let's see how Klay works out here. Big questions for both teams, and Dallas getting started in what, a week from today. Their
Yeah,
training camp's opening, right? And Mike
yeah,
Curtis for first full season with the Dallas Morning News, gonna have all the coverage down there. Good friend of mine that I crossed paths with throughout his time in Detroit, and moved down there and did a great job covering the finals. Appreciate you stopping by, Kurt. I think this is your first time on the Garden Report. Good having you here in this version. We've had you at the arenas plenty of time, but good having you on here.
Hey, appreciate you for having me, man. Can't wait to see you down the road. when the season starts.
Yep, and you can check out him on Twitter at Mike A Curtis 2. You can find all his work over there. Thanks, Mike. We'll talk to you in a couple months.
Appreciate you, man. Take care.
All right. I want to give a shout out to another great sponsor here on the Garden Report. They're back again, and it is Nutrafol with their awesome offer right now. $10 off your first month subscription on Nutrafol and free shipping. It's not often you get that in an offer here on the Garden Report, but they got it for you there. Again, $10 off your month subscription and free shipping. So what is it? Nutrafol. As we transition into the fall and our schedules get busier, and my schedule is about to get pretty busy tomorrow. Back to school activities for the kids. Celtics trying to go back to back, tighter work deadlines, all those things you associate with fall. And the start of holiday preparation is a big one, starting with Halloween. Just the first of the 3 big ones there going into the winter. It's easy to forget about taking care of ourselves during this busy season. One simple but effective thing you can do for yourself is start taking Nutrafol. You're interested in having hair that grows faster, stronger, longer, having visibly thicker volume, experiencing noticeably less shedding, thicker lashes and brows. All that's possible with Nutrafol. It's the #1 dermatologist recommended hair growth supplement brand, trusted by over 1 million people. See thicker, stronger, faster growing hair with less shedding in just 3 to 6 months with Nutrafol. Thinning hair is different for men and women, so a one-size-fits-all approach to hair growth doesn't cut it. Nutrafol has multiple formulas for men and women that are tailored to different life stages and lifestyle factors, such as a plant-based lifestyle, postpartum, menopause. What's going on in your life can impact your hair. So you can just get what you need with Nutrafol. It's physician formulated with 100% drug-free ingredients. They support healthy hair growth from within by targeting key root causes of thinning, and that's stress, hormones, aging, nutrition, lifestyle, and metabolism through whole body health. So get results you can run your fingers through for a limited time with Nutrafol. They're offering our listeners $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping when you go to Nutrafol.com and enter the promo code GARDEN. Find out why over 4,500 healthcare professionals and stylists recommend Nutrafol for healthier hair. Nutrafol.com, spelled Nutrafol.com, promo code GARDEN, GARDEN. That's Nutrafol.com, promo code GARDEN. Let's talk a little bit about training camp beginning tomorrow. To expect, what to look for. First of all, there will be a live stream here on Celtics All Access CLNS Media. So all the interviews tomorrow, and I would expect we'll hear from the big guys, Tatum, Brown, White, Holiday. Kristaps Porzingis is in town, so I'm pretty sure we'll hear from him. Where his recovery's at, how long he's expecting to be out, how it went over the summer, having to deal with the surgery and all the rest while trying to celebrate the championship there. That's a big one tomorrow for sure. The young guys, where are they at? Where could they fit in? Obviously, I talked to Al Horford yesterday, who said Baylor Shireman has looked good so far. Jordan Walsh getting a seal of approval from Horford as well after a rough summer league, interestingly enough. I think there's a story there, on nights where Celtics are resting guys shorthanded. Even Keita. I think Keita is one of the more interesting guys in this camp as well. So I think that's another story there. Lonnie Walker, is he going to make the team? What are they thinking? Brad Stevens often talks on media day as well, so that'll be a good question for him. Something to look for. What's the plan for Walker? Why'd they sign him to that deal? Could he be on the roster opening night? Could he be in Maine? All of that. I don't think we'll know now, but he's been at the Garden a lot, and they've had eyes on him shooting and just getting in work there before camp begins on Wednesday. So that's certainly a big 3 story going into this camp, as well as the mentality. I'm sure that'll be everything Joe talks about. how they're going to carry forward the momentum and approach from last year after achieving that championship. It's something Al Horford talked about with me yesterday. Again, that interview available on CLNS Media. And then the rest of the teams around the league stacking up, making a run at them. Talked about Dallas here, Philly we hit on in a podcast already, as well as Cleveland and Miami, teams that maybe people aren't talking about as much, but are still well-suited when healthy to playing the Celtics tough. So Brad said it. I'm sure he's going to say it again tomorrow. It's going to be tougher this year. It's going to be harder. Porzingis' absence already makes a difference, and they're going to have to manage after big minutes for many of these guys into the summer in Tatum's case. How much basketball they're playing during the regular season. Do they take a hit during the regular season and have to make up for it in the playoffs? There's some stories here. It's going to be dominant. I think they're going to reach levels that look like last year. But naturally, when guys had all of that momentum and attention to detail built up in let's get that first championship, and everybody except for Holiday's case, doing that again into year two after such a short summer in many of these guys' cases, it's a challenge. And that Porzingis absence for as long as he's going to be out is just going to make it that much harder. So I'm not manufacturing any concern, panic, the possibility that this team could lose short of the finals, stuff like that. I don't have concern about any of that. But managing the regular season, I do think is going to be a tall order for the Celtics here. So again, subscribe, lock in. 10 o'clock tomorrow. Interviews are going to fire off. I'm sure Brad Stevens, Joe Mazzulla will be the ones who tip off training camp tomorrow. And again, we'll hear from Tatum, Brown, Horford, Porzingis, Derek, Drew, Peyton, Sam, Shireman again after his first summer in Boston. All the way down the line. I think we'll probably hear from like 10 plus Celtics at the least tomorrow. So lock in, get ready for a ton of quotes, ton of articles. Sure, a show tomorrow again as well. And then it's training camp time. Celtics gearing up next weekend, the weekend after this one. They will be heading to Abu Dhabi for their first action of the preseason against the Nuggets. I'm Bobby Manning. Thanks again to Mike Curtis. Shout out to our sponsors here. Show them some love as we prepare to cover the Celtics this season. More love they get, the more we're able to bring to you on the road, at home, everywhere this season as I prepare for my 5th season covering the Celtics. Parts of 6, going back to the bubble with the Garden Report here. So again, CLNS at Prize Picks for a $50 bonus when you play $5. Game time, CLNS gets you $20 off your first purchase. Again, terms apply over there, and our official ticket partner here at CLNS Media. And Nutrafol running a great offer, $10 off your first month subscription, free shipping over there at Nutrafol.com. Use the code GARDEN, GARDEN, Nutrafol.com, code GARDEN. That's it for tonight. We'll see you tomorrow. There's a ton of coverage at the Auerbach Center. This has been the Garden Report, and good night.